Welcome to NTD News Today. I'm Kevin Hogan. Let's take a look at our top stories. Microsoft criticizing the EU's efforts to regulate artificial intelligence, and U.S. lawmakers seek to act quickly to keep the tech in check. We bring you analysis on the trade-off between regulation and innovation. Is your kid's school safe from a cyber attack? Government officials say such hacking incidents are on the rise. We have the details. Backlash against a special grand jury foreperson from Georgia. Critics say she made highly questionable remarks while on a recent media tour. 6 lawmakers are asking the FBI to investigate an influential banker. They are concerned that he could spill U.S. intelligence to Beijing officials. A European court ruled a Russian ban on religious freedom illegal. The restrictions target materials about the spiritual practice Falun Gong. We delve into the use and regulation of generative artificial intelligence. That includes ChatGPT, which has been used to write essays that have passed graduate-level exams. We look at the European Union's efforts to rein in the tech and what states are doing, as well as some cautions about the use of AI. Joining us now is Jake Morabito, Director of the Communications and Technology Task Force at the American Legislative Exchange Council. Great to have you with us today, Jake.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
Microsoft spoke at a UK parliamentary hearing and criticized the EU's efforts to regulate how AI is introduced and developed. The company is criticizing the bloc's risk-based approach to regulating the technology. What are the pros and cons to the EU's proposals on regulation?
Well, one thing that I'm really concerned about is the European Union, over the past several years, they've enacted lots of onerous and strict regulations on the technology sector, including their Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act. They're now considering another piece of legislation called the Artificial Intelligence Act. And as we've seen with kind of how AI has unfolded with ChatGPT, this is still a relatively new and nascent technology. And something that I'm concerned about is that if legislators get too far ahead of the curve with legislation, they're going to stifle innovation and really limit the ability of these technology companies to work with businesses here at home to improve their products and improve choice for consumers.
That is really interesting. You point out that there's a balance between regulation and also letting this technology develop and see what the applications are. Tell us about the states. What are they doing to regulate, or are they doing too much?
So a lot of states like Arizona and Utah are actually doing a good thing here by giving private companies room to innovate and explore with new technologies. Now, some technology or some regulations on the books are inhibiting new technologies from coming on the scene, but some states like Arizona and Utah have regulatory sandboxes that allow private companies to experiment in a controlled environment where the Attorney General is able to protect consumers and allow companies to experiment with technologies like ChatGPT or drones or blockchain and help bring those products to market in a safe way.
Those experiments, maybe they can yield some good results, maybe they could be a little risky. Let's talk about generative AI, how it's quickly changing the tech world. Some lawmakers are urging Congress to get an early advantage over regulating AI. What would this process look like if they were to do this?
Now, you'll have already seen that some members of Congress on the Hill are looking at some legislation, like you say, as far as bias or kind of the risks associated with this technology. And I think even the Biden administration had an executive order recently to a similar effect. But one concern, again, is as far as ChatGPT specifically went viral a few months ago. It's only been about 3 months since that technology broke onto the scene. We're still at the very early phases of this. So one of the things is that if members of Congress start regulating too soon, we'd kind of seal off some avenues with this kind of top-down onerous approach.
According to the Brookings Institute, the risk associated with generative AI is that the original developer of the AI cannot see the downstream applications of the technology, and therefore it could increase the likelihood of errors. They say it's not a problem if it's used for clothing recommendations, but it can be a big problem if used for healthcare or making socioeconomic decisions. What's your reaction to this?
Now, it's definitely something that businesses and tech developers need to be cognizant of, is what data sets are going in to fuel these learning algorithms that power tools like ChatGPT or DALL-E. And certainly on the business-to-business side, there's longstanding laws like HIPAA that need to be abided by. But I think that technology companies Alec believes that the free market should really be driving this technology, and software developers should really be exploring partnerships with private industry, and maybe how can it be safely applied in industries like healthcare or education or cybersecurity to really improve our lives.
An interesting note on the data sets that go into it, and the free market has proved valuable in many cases, and we do have regulators for a reason. Jake Morabito, Director of Communications and Technology Task Force at the American Legislative Exchange Council, thank you so much for your input.
Thank you.
The Justice Department says Google purposely and repeatedly deleted chat logs it promised to preserve. According to the DOJ, for years, Google employees used a chat setting that automatically deletes messages after 24 hours to discuss sensitive topics. That setting can be changed to save messages for up to 18 months. The chats being called into question are allegedly related to the antitrust suit the government filed against the tech giant. The DOJ wants Google to face court sanctions over destroying the logs. Google has not commented on the matter. The Pentagon is investigating an internal email leak. It's working to find out how a trove of internal U.S. Special Operations Command emails leaked for 2 weeks without the military's knowledge, and why the problem wasn't detected sooner. An independent cybersecurity researcher discovered 3 terabytes of unclassified emails from the Department of Defense. They date back to February 8th, and they were all found on the internet. Right now, investigators believe it was due to a misconfiguration of a computer server. Cyber attacks against K-12 schools in the United States are on the rise. Efforts to combat them are hampered by inadequate staffing and security procedures. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more.
The cyber attacks include phishing, ransomware, denial of service attacks, and video conference disruptions. They hit at least 45 U.S. school districts operating nearly 2,000 schools in 2022. The number of attacks rose sharply during COVID-19 related school shutdowns. The rapid switch to online learning technologies at the time brought new vulnerabilities. The rise in cyber attacks has left education officials scrambling. They need to address the threat and mitigate the damage caused by breaches to their computer systems, and also handle ransom demands and the cost of upgrading security procedures and computer equipment. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, reported a dramatic increase in attacks in recent years. It used publicly available data to determine this, as no central data collection system exists. The lack of a central reporting mechanism is just one reason the exact number is hard to pin down. Officials say schools seem to be reluctant to voluntarily disclose these attacks. One reason is the fear of exposing their vulnerability and potentially being targeted again. Schools are often seen as easy targets because they're less tech-savvy and either can't afford to or choose not to prioritize computer security. There's no single motive for cyber attacks on schools. Some hackers are after money, using so-called ransomware to lock administrators out of their own system until a payment is received. Others want to steal personal data or simply disrupt school operations. In some cases, children or teens have launched cyber attacks on their own schools, often coinciding with a test day. Officials say learning disruptions from cyber attacks have ranged from 3 days to 3 weeks, and recovery time took up to 9 months. 2 problems make U.S. schools vulnerable to repeated attacks: a lack of action by local administrators, and a lack of coordination among federal and local agencies. CISA says cybersecurity risk management needs to be a top priority for school leaders. It has published an online toolkit to help school administrators address the threat of cyber attacks. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Speaking of school security, a man in Massachusetts is accused of setting up a crypto mining operation in the crawl space of a middle and high school. The computers were hooked up to the school's electrical system. Crypto mining refers to verifying crypto transactions and creating new value. This process usually costs large amounts of electricity. The town's facilities director found the issue during a routine inspection of the school in 2021. The suspect is now facing charges of fraudulent use of electricity and school vandalism. Because he failed to appear at the arraignment yesterday, a judge has issued a default warrant for his arrest. You may have had trouble finding pre-made salads at the grocery store lately. Here's why. Dole had to shut down production plants temporarily in North America 2 weeks ago due to a cyber attack. A source says it was a ransomware attack. It's not known exactly how long production was halted. Ransomware attacks have been targeting the food and agricultural sector over the last 2 years. Back in 2021, the world's largest meat supplier, JBS, had to close factories in the U.S., Canada, and Australia before it paid hackers $11 million. One company that tracks such payments says ransomware revenue actually fell last year. It was down to about $450 million from over $760 million in 2021. The foreperson of a special grand jury investigating former President Trump is making headlines. That's after she went on a media tour talking about their investigation. Critics from the left and the right are now reacting.
Emily Kohrs has served as the foreperson of a special grand jury for 8 months. The jury is investigating former President Donald Trump's alleged criminal interference in the 2020 election in Fulton County, Georgia. She made headlines after appearing on various outlets and making statements like this one when she explained on MSNBC why she wanted to subpoena President Trump.
I kind of wanted to subpoena the former president because I got to swear everybody in. And so I thought it'd be really cool to get 60 seconds with President Trump of me looking at him and being like, do you solemnly swear? And me getting to swear him in. I kind of just thought that would be an awesome moment.
People from the left and the right are now criticizing choosing Kohrs as the foreperson. CNN senior legal analyst told Anderson Cooper that Kohrs doesn't seem to be taking her task seriously.
This is a very serious prospect here. We're talking about indicting any person. You're talking about potentially taking away that person's liberty. We're talking about potentially a former president for the first time in this nation's history. She does not seem to be taking that very seriously.
There's no reason.
Trump's attorney in Georgia told the Associated Press that even before the media interviews, they had concerns about the grand jury's proceedings. One attorney said, quote, "The end product is the reliability of anything that has taken place in there is completely tainted and called into question." He added that he's not attacking her, saying she's a product of a circus that cloaked itself as a special purpose grand jury. Last week, a judge ordered the release of a part of the grand jury's report. It revealed that a majority of the jury believed that no widespread fraud took place in the Georgia 2020 presidential election. The former president weighed in on Truth Social, saying, "This Georgia case is ridiculous, a strictly political continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time."
More studies are coming out on the effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccine. According to a new study from CDC researchers, natural immunity offers better protection than vaccines. The study found that post-infection immunity provided 76% protection against COVID-19 associated hospitalizations. A primary series of the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine in people without a prior infection provided just 39% protection. The study also found that natural immunity lasted longer at higher levels than the vaccines. The study was conducted while Omicron was the dominant virus strain in the country. The paper was published ahead of a peer review by the Journal of Infectious Diseases. It was funded by the CDC. The study confirms previous research on natural immunity versus the vaccine. A CDC study previously found that natural immunity was superior to vaccination while Delta was the dominant strain. We're learning more about the toxic train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Federal investigators are now saying the disaster was 100% preventable. But the National Transportation Safety Board also says there is no evidence the train's crew did anything wrong. Its preliminary report found that an alarm went off and warned the crew a wheel bearing was overheating shortly before the disaster. The engineer tried to stop the train, but apparently it was too late.
This was 100% preventable.
Nearly 3 weeks after a toxic train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio.
We call things accidents. There is no accident. Every single event that we investigate is preventable.
The National Transportation Safety Board released a preliminary report on the incident.
We know what derailed the train. We have a lot of questions.
Questions that have investigators focusing on the overheating of one of the car's wheel set and bearing.
The recorded temperature of the bearing increased from 38 degrees Fahrenheit above the ambient temperature, which at the time was 10 degrees Fahrenheit, to 103 degrees above ambient just 10 miles later.
According to the report, the temperature of the bearing increased as it passed 2 defect sensors along the tracks, but not high enough to trigger an audible alarm. And it wasn't until the train passed a 3rd sensor with a temperature of over 253 degrees Fahrenheit above the ambient temperature, it triggered an audible alarm, alerting the crew to stop the train.
The engineer at the time was following another train and was already in dynamic braking to slow behind the train. So he increased the brake application to further slow and stop the train. We have no evidence that the crew did anything wrong.
In all, 38 cars derailed, including 11 tank cars carrying hazardous materials that subsequently ignited, fueling fires. The NTSB says it will investigate Norfolk Southern's use of the sensors.
Had there been a detector earlier, that derailment may not have occurred.
That's essentially where the cars were piled up, from here to there, right?
Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg visited East Palestine Thursday for the first time since the disaster, saying he could have come sooner but didn't want to disrupt the investigation.
Extreme weather swept across parts of the U.S. yesterday. The winter storm has affected more than 70 million people. It knocked out power for almost 1 million homes and businesses and left at least one person dead. Here's more on the storm sprawling across the nation.
A series of brutal winter storms continued to stretch across the U.S. on Thursday, shutting down roads, schools, and businesses across parts of the country, and cutting power for nearly 1 million people. Officials say a volunteer firefighter was killed in Michigan after being electrocuted by a downed power line.
Okay. It's not the way that you want to go down that hill.
No.
In Oregon, drivers slid down icy roads.
I'm on 26.
And almost a foot of snow paralyzed travel in parts of Portland.
Quarter mile, Jefferson Street.
Yeah, I keep some emergency items in my car. I had a blanket and I had some water and just trying to keep warm thoughts and not run my engine too long because, I didn't know how long we would be there.
It was crazy, man. There was a tree fall in the middle of the highway, which was crazy. It was snowing at the same time. There was people walking.
No. Still, some people managed to have some fun.
They always have snow again on the news, and so we kind of ignored it. And, 11 inches later, here we are.
And rare winter conditions hit California on Thursday. Much of the state was under high wind and winter storm warnings. Families could be seen playing in the snow near San Jose, and snow blanketing roadways in Joshua Tree National Park. San Francisco and even Los Angeles could expect snow up to 8 feet through to Saturday. The National Weather Service says another 18 inches of snow could be expected from Washington State to New England, with some spots expecting wind chills equivalent to minus 40 degrees. Reporting by Xiwen Rong, NTD News.
When the storm pummeled the upper Midwestern states, it left a blanket of ice and snow. It also froze this flag in Howell, Michigan, about 50 miles from Detroit. Take a look. The homeowner said that when he went outside to take the flag down, he found it had frozen, and his attempt to move it made a loud crackling noise. The storm knocked out power to more than 900,000 people across the country and sent wind chills equivalent to negative 40 degrees. And still to come, a judge orders former President Trump and FBI Director Christopher Wray to testify. It's over lawsuits filed by 2 former FBI officials. And Congresswoman Katie Porter is accused of using taxpayer funds to support her election campaign. More in just a moment here on NTD News Today. A federal judge has ordered the questioning of former President Trump and FBI Director Christopher Wray. The decision is part of 2 ongoing lawsuits involving former FBI officials. The 2 cases focus on whether Peter Strzok, a former FBI agent, and Lisa Page, an FBI attorney, were fired without cause. Strzok helped lead the investigation into Trump's alleged ties with Russia. The investigation came up empty-handed. He was dismissed in 2018 after he was caught exchanging dozens of anti-Trump text messages with Page. The 2 also reportedly had an extramarital affair. The duo sued the administration, claiming the firings were the result of pressure from Trump and his allies. But the White House said it was Strzok and Page's own actions that led to their dismissals. A judge has tossed out an accusation against former Trump attorney Sidney Powell. It involved her actions following the 2020 election. A Texas judge tossed out a petition filed by the State Bar of Texas's Commission for Lawyer Discipline. The commission had accused Powell of violating Texas's Attorney Code of Conduct. But the judge said they did not meet the burden of proof. The commission could appeal the decision. It's unclear if they will do so. A nonprofit watchdog claims that Representative Katie Porter illegally used official congressional resources in her new election campaign. The Democrat from California is running to replace Senator Dianne Feinstein in the 2024 election. The complaint alleges that Porter used official funds to pay for ads that were used for official purposes, but also for her campaign. The virtually identical ads were produced and distributed by the same company. Multiple laws and congressional rules bar lawmakers from paying for campaign expenses with taxpayer funds. Porter's spokesman disputed the legal complaint. He says the vendor for the ads is approved by the House and that all of the content was officially reviewed by both Democrat and Republican staff. Porter has faced other ethics controversies. Last year, the Heritage Foundation president filed an ethics complaint against her after she accused one of the think tank's experts of lying to Congress. Porter also faced questions when she bought a house for half the average sales price of homes in the area. A prominent progressive Democrat is throwing her hat into the presidential ring again. Marianne Williamson confirmed in an interview yesterday she will be running for the Oval Office in 2024. Williamson ran in 2020 and dropped out of the race early. She endorsed Bernie Sanders after dropping out. The self-help author says she plans to launch her campaign officially in Washington on March 4th. The Democrat is the first in her party to confirm a 2024 presidential run. This could put Williamson in a primary against President Biden if he decides to run for re-election. Biden still hasn't made a formal announcement, but is widely expected to soon. And speaking of presidential primary debates, the Republican National Committee is planning its first in Milwaukee. That's going to be in August during its summer meeting. The RNC is still ironing out the criteria for participation. One of the requirements being discussed is for candidates to endorse whoever wins. RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel has stressed the importance of unified support for the nominee in order for the party to succeed. The first GOP presidential debate for 2024 is on the calendar. The Republican National Committee voted to hold it in Milwaukee in August 2024. That will coincide with the RNC's summer meeting. Other details of the debate aren't set yet. One possible requirement for candidates is to sign a loyalty pledge promising to support the eventual GOP nominee. In recent comments about the pledge, the RNC chair spoke of the need for unity to win the White House in 2024. But the proposal might be at odds with former President Trump, who has expressed reluctance to sign a loyalty pledge. When asked if he would support another Republican nominee, Trump responded, "It would depend." That was during an interview with radio host Hugh Hewitt. An elderly Arizona rancher was released from jail on a $1 million bond. He's accused of killing a Mexican national on his border property. The judge allowed George Allen Kelly to use his ranch property as collateral for the bond. Fox News reported that the judge set the next hearing for Friday, but Kelly's defense wanted a 30 to 60-day delay in the proceedings. That would allow them time to talk to experts and gather forensic and ballistic evidence they say the authorities neglected. Kelly was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in January. The body of the alleged victim was found on Kelly's cattle ranch near the U.S.-Mexico border. The fatal shooting is alleged to have occurred on January 30th. The Mexican national lived just south of the border in Mexico. According to reports, he had, prior to his death, entered the United States multiple times illegally and was deported repeatedly. A West Virginia law regarding transgender sports has been blocked. It required people to compete on sports teams only of their biological sex. This means that transgender athletes in the state can, for now, compete in teams of the gender they identify with. The original legislation states that a biologically male person cannot participate in female sports and vice versa in public middle schools, high schools, and universities. The law was challenged soon after it was signed in 2021 by biological male child Becky Pepper Jackson, who was 11 at the time. Pepper Jackson identifies as female and wanted to participate in female sports teams at a middle school. But administrators cited the new state law. The lawsuit claimed that biological male children who identify as female are being discriminated against. In the ruling, the judge specified that he blocked the law since the teams aren't, quote, substantially related to an important government interest. A Los Angeles judge sentenced Harvey Weinstein to 16 more years in prison yesterday. A jury convicted him on sexual assault charges. The charges stemmed from an assault on a former model and actress in 2013. The woman was identified in court as Jane Doe 1. Weinstein insisted he didn't know her and that she was making it up to get money. The prison term likely amounts to a life sentence for the 70-year-old. He will serve the sentence after completing the 23 years he received in 2020 for a similar conviction in New York. The Los Angeles jury acquitted Weinstein of charges relating to a second alleged victim and failed to reach verdicts on counts involving 2 other women. Here's what the woman's attorney had to say after the sentencing.
In any case, I'm happy about the sentence today. Although my clients were silenced.
Defense attorneys argued that some of the women had consensual relations with Weinstein to advance their careers and said the other accounts were fabricated. Weinstein denies any wrongdoing and maintains he is innocent. Weinstein's attorneys had asked for him to be allowed to serve the sentence concurrently with his ongoing 23-year term. He's appealing his previous conviction and is eligible for parole in New York in 2039. The U.S. Virgin Islands opened a lawsuit against JPMorgan Chase yesterday. The lawsuit accuses the bank of aiding Jeffrey Epstein in sex trafficking. It's demanding the bank disclose more about its CEO's role in business dealings with Epstein. The lawsuit is seeking unspecified damages. In a filing in Manhattan federal court, the U.S. Virgin Islands said JPMorgan's wrongful conduct continued until at least August 2019. The bank is said to have agreed to provide documents only through 2014. It wants the documents for the next 5 years. The lawsuit identifies CEO Jamie Dimon as a valuable source of information about retaining Epstein as a client, as well as Epstein's referrals of prominent and wealthy potential clients. The filing says the referral relationship continued after Epstein stopped being a client. Dimon has not been accused of wrongdoing. JPMorgan is seeking the lawsuit's dismissal. The company did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Boeing has temporarily paused deliveries of its 787 Dreamliners just months after it resumed deliveries following a year-long halt. The Federal Aviation Administration says the plane maker is doing additional analysis on a fuselage component. Deliveries won't resume until the FAA is satisfied the issue has been addressed. 31 Dreamliners were delivered last year. The FAA is also looking at whether those need to be examined. Boeing previously halted deliveries because of quality control issues. 2 million air fryers are being recalled over fire and burn risks. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is telling people to stop using Cosori brand air fryers immediately. The agency says it has received more than 200 incident reports about the fryers burning, melting, overheating, and smoking. That includes 10 reports of minor skin burns. The company says the hazard is the result of overheating electrical connectors. The air fryers were sold between 2018 through last December at a number of retailers, including Amazon, Best Buy, Home Depot, Costco, and Target. For information on how to get a replacement, head to Cosori.com. And still to come, Canada's federal government has a warning about one of the country's domestic banks. They say it could have ties to the Chinese regime and poses a national security concern. And lawmakers are calling on the FBI to launch an immediate investigation into a banker. What are his alleged ties to Beijing's influence operation in the U.S.? We'll have the details soon when we return.
We're entering an unprecedented period of economic turmoil. The economy is unstable, our government is in shambles, and the global war on energy has created a domestic crisis. Americans need a way to protect their financial future. One way to ensure your wealth in retirement is by purchasing physical gold and silver. We can help. You can roll any part of your retirement account into a gold or silver IRA. Better yet, you can open a gold or silver IRA in 5 minutes or less using our online application. Preserving your family's financial legacy is a choice that's always available to you. And when you're ready, we're here to help. Call us and speak to one of our IRA professionals. Let's build your financial legacy together. GSI Exchange, wealth for generations to come.
Good to have you back with us. An urgent plea of investigation. 6 lawmakers are calling on the FBI to investigate a banker named Dominic Ng. The lawmakers are concerned that Ng could spill the beans on U.S. intelligence to Beijing officials. That's over his alleged ties to the Chinese Communist Party and the influential position he's holding right now. Let's zoom in.
President Biden tapped Ng to represent the U.S. at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. In this role, Ng would have access to privileged information and intelligence. He would also advise world leaders on key issues. APEC is a forum that promotes free trade in Asia-Pacific region. Its 21 member countries account for over 60% of global GDP, including the U.S., China, and Australia. Ng's appointment comes 2 years after he donated to President Biden's fundraising committee called the Biden Victory Fund.
Before President Biden nominated him, Mr. Ng had donated $100,000 to the Biden Victory Fund and $35,500 to the Democratic National Committee.
Philip Lenzicki is an investigative reporter. He broke the story on Ng's ties to agencies linked to Beijing's United Front Work Department. The state agency works to expand the Chinese Communist Party's influence overseas. Experts say it's involved with Chinese espionage efforts.
And what this is the Chinese Communist Party's effort to manage those outside of the party. And so they are targeting non-Chinese, they're targeting religious minorities, and even traditionally they're going after business associations and trade unions and all types of clubs. They want to get control of these different organizations so that they can establish a united front and push the CCP's policy objectives.
And here's what Lenzicki uncovered about those ties. Ng has held high-level positions in groups tied to Beijing's United Front Work Department. Since 2019, he served as executive director of the China Overseas Friendship Association, or COFA. The United Front Work Department founded the group. Looking back to 2013, Ng worked as the executive director of another agency related to COFA. It's called the China Overseas Exchange Association. Ng met with 2 leaders from this organization in the U.S. and China. These 2 leaders are also members of what's called the CPPCC. That's the committee that oversees Beijing's United Front system. One of Koya's leaders is Qiu Yuanping. In a meeting, she told Ng that she has faith in Chinese-American elected officials and hopes they'll play more active roles in Congress, local government, and think tanks in the future. Ng wears multiple hats. On top of his CEO title for East-West Bank, he's also a member of a think tank in Washington called the Council on Foreign Relations. Beyond that, he's a former board member of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, Los Angeles branch. In the letter to the FBI, lawmakers highlighted a concern. They say China's United Front Department plus its affiliated groups allow people like Ng to gain influence in sensitive American institutions and advocate for Beijing's interests. They say Beijing used this tactic to infiltrate governments and influence policies and support outcomes deemed desirable by the Chinese Communist Party. NTD reached out to Ng for comment, but did not receive a reply before airtime. Lenzicki said it's important for Americans to wrap their heads around a potential reality.
That there is a truly widespread and insidious network that is embedded itself in the United States, and that this network of individuals belong to businesses. They belong to local community organizations. They belong to media outlets, and they're in government. This is an extremely concerning potential reality for folks to have to grapple with.
Responding to the Republican lawmakers' letter, several Democrat lawmakers, including Judy Chu and Ted Lieu, defended Ng. In a statement, they said no Chinese American should face suspicions of disloyalty based on their ethnicity. The FBI said it has no further comment. NTD also reached out to the White House and APAC, but did not hear back before airtime.
Canada's federal government is warning that a domestic bank could be tied to the Chinese regime. Canada's finance minister says there could be national security concerns. Here are the details.
Canadian Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland reportedly wrote a letter to 3 founding shareholders of Wealth One Bank of Canada late last year. In it, she said the 3 founders could be susceptible to coercion by the Chinese regime. Wealth One is a bank based in Toronto catering to Chinese Canadians. It was founded in 2016. 2 of the founders have property and investments in China. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service has been investigating the bank for national security reasons since 2021. Freeland also said in her letter that the Canadian government believes the 3 founders may have been involved in money laundering. She is giving them an opportunity to respond to the government's concerns. Wealth One said in a statement that the 3 shareholders are no longer directors of the bank, and that none of their shareholders have ever had a role in the bank's operations.
More limits being slapped on TikTok. The European Commission is banning staff from using the video sharing app on their work-issued phones. And for those using their personal phones for work, those devices must also stay TikTok-free. The move would affect over 30,000 employees. The Commission is the European Union's top executive body. It makes laws and manages day-to-day operations of the EU.
The measure aims to protect the Commission against cybersecurity threats and actions which may be exploited for cyber attacks against the corporate environment of the Commission.
In the U.S., the federal government, as well as most states, have already banned TikTok from government-managed devices. That's over concerns that user data could end up in Beijing's hands. TikTok is owned by Beijing-based developer ByteDance. Under Chinese law, companies must hand over data if officials ask for it. TikTok denies handing over user data to Beijing and said it's disappointed with the EU Commission's decision. An order suppressing religious freedom has been in place in Russia for several years. Now a European court is calling it unlawful. Here are the details.
Europe's top human rights watchdog deeming a years-long Russian ban illegal. In its January 31st ruling, the European Court of Human Rights took aim at Moscow's ban on certain informational materials. They are related to spiritual practice Falun Gong. The Kremlin issued the rule back in 2008 at the time of the Beijing Summer Olympics. The ban covers 4 materials, including the discipline's main book, Zhuan Falun. Russia also outlawed 2 pamphlets that introduced the practice and highlighted Beijing's human rights abuses, plus an investigative report on the Chinese regime's forced organ harvesting. Organ harvesting is known as part of Beijing's persecution campaign against Falun Gong. Launched in 1999, it aims to eradicate the practice. Moscow labeled the 4 materials as extremist in its ban. But the European Court says the restriction violates freedom of expression. Levi Browdy, executive director of the Falun Dafa Information Center, welcomed the court's decision. He told the Epoch Times newspaper, quote, "We recognize Moscow is not the CCP," adding that Russian authorities can right their course and not do the CCP's bidding in suppressing religious freedom. Canadian human rights lawyer David Matus also commented on the ruling. He co-authored the report that Russia banned. In an email to the Epoch Times, he likened Moscow's rule to Beijing's, saying birds of a feather stick together, adding that citizens in both nations are entitled to freedom of speech in name only. Matus said he doubts Russia will abide by the European rulings, but called it a voice of sanity. Russia withdrew from the Council of Europe in March last year. The Council includes the European Court of Human Rights. Moscow has refused to comply with any of the court's judgments since then. Falun Gong follows the core principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and features 5 meditative exercises. Beijing's nationwide suppression of the system continues in China today. Falun Gong adherents in Russia also face pressure for their beliefs.
A food crisis in North Korea is reaching even those in prison. With food running short, dozens of prisoners have reportedly escaped from the country's detention facilities since the end of last year. A South Korean media outlet reported the news, citing an insider. After the breakout, the prisoners allegedly stole food from locals and even committed murders, sparking fear among residents. Authorities are still hunting for the runaways. Food shortages in North Korea are said to have worsened after the regime shut down its borders to control the pandemic. More than 700 prisoners have reportedly died of starvation or disease in 3 prisons over the past 2 years. And if you have any news tips or feedback for the show, don't hesitate to email us at news.today@ntd.com. Coming up, Ukraine's president marks the first anniversary of the war with Russia and handed out awards to troops. We'll return with that and more after the break. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion today. He had a somber message of defiance for his people and tears for the thousands of soldiers who have died.
On a cold, cloudy Friday morning in Kiev, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. He addressed members of the country's armed forces in St. Sophia Square next to the green and gold cathedral, a symbol of the city's resilience. As he has done throughout the war, Zelensky let his emotions show during the 30-minute ceremony.
I'm proud of you. We all, each and every one, are proud of you. May this be proudly proclaimed everywhere. Ukraine is alive.
Holding back tears as he gave out Hero of Ukraine awards to troops. Those present bowed their heads during a minute's silence. In the city of Bucha, a service was held to commemorate the dead. Fighting in the 12-month conflict continues to rage on in Ukraine's east and south. Russia's Wagner private army claimed on Friday to have captured another village on the outskirts of Bakhmut, the small mining city in the east that has been the focus of Moscow's offensive. And the war, which Russia calls a special military operation, has no end in sight.
President Biden has announced new sanctions against Russia and anyone aiding Russia. He met virtually today with G7 leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The U.S. Treasury Department calls these sanctions the most significant to date. Russia's metals and mining sector is among those targeted, along with banks, arms dealers, and tech companies tied to weapons production. In total, 250 people and firms are specifically named. The White House also highlights those in other countries that have allegedly evaded the sanctions.
The United States will implement sweeping sanctions against key sectors that generate revenue for Putin, go after more Russian banks, Russia's defense and technology industry, and actors in third-party countries that are attempting to backfill and evade our sanctions.
And White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan announced new aid for Ukraine yesterday. He says the U.S. will provide an additional $2 billion in security assistance. Sullivan was also asked about Ukraine's request for F-16 fighter jets. He says from the White House's perspective, it's a question for the long-term defense of Ukraine. The UK's defense secretary said Vladimir Putin is content to run his army like a meat grinder. He said nearly 200,000 Russian soldiers are dead or injured, but also said the war may go on for another 12 months. Meanwhile, the British Army continues to train Ukrainian troops. More on this from NTD's Malcolm Hudson.
Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said that 12 months into the war in Ukraine, more than 188,000 Russian soldiers are dead or injured. Speaking to LBC, Wallace said Russian President Vladimir Putin has crossed the line.
You know, when someone's crossed the line that think it's okay to do that to your own people and is running effectively a meat grinder for an army, I think he's not going to stop.
Wallace said he thinks the war will go on for another 12 months. He made the comments after spending Wednesday at Bovington Camp in Dorset. Ukrainian troops were being trained on Challenger tanks. Britain would be the first country to supply tanks to Ukraine's armed forces. While Wallace stressed that the battle in Ukraine is not a NATO conflict, he also suggested he was not opposed to alliance member Poland sending aircraft to its neighbour. Ministers say British jets would require too much training and logistics to give to Ukraine right now. But speaking at a press briefing on Wednesday, Armed Forces Minister James Heappey said we will be training pilots.
Now, it's really important to be clear that that announcement of pilot training was not made in the sort of direct anticipation that we will therefore give jets.
Heaphy said the pilot's training is for post-war peacetime, when the UK can have a new discussion with Ukraine on supplying jets. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
The Italian Senate has passed a decree on how to deal with sea rescuers. Since 2021, NGOs have been bringing more and more people from Africa into Italian ports. The Italian Parliament has now approved a code of conduct for migrant aid ships. The new set of rules is part of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's efforts to limit dangerous crossings. According to the government, the rescuers encourage people to make the dangerous journey across the Mediterranean from North Africa. Under the new law, ships must ask for access to a port after a rescue and enter it without delay. They must also disclose detailed information about their rescue activities. Captains who violate the new rules risk fines of over $50,000, and their vessels can be seized for repeated violations, according to the law. The central Mediterranean route from North Africa to Italy has been increasingly used by migrants again since 2021. Many arrivals travel on from there to Northern Europe. And coming up, visitors at a dome in Florence view 10,000 square feet of mosaics. A specially designed scaffolding allows them to get an up-close experience. And dogs may be able to tell when humans are teasing them. The researchers behind a new behavioral study say dogs can recognize our intentions. Get the story in just a minute.
A performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
Freedom is not free, and neither is the truth. In order to bring you the facts, our reporters are out there on the front lines getting the true story. Some of them served 10 years of prison in China. We've been censored on social media. Our Hong Kong printing offices were set on fire, and we've been repeatedly attacked by the Chinese Communist Party. But no matter what, we believe that you deserve the truth, and so we'll continue to bring the truth to life. Head on over to getepic.com and try honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Welcome back. For the first time, visitors can view more than 10,000 square feet of mosaics covering a dome in Florence. The huge restoration scaffolding allows tourists to see them up close. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the project details.
The dome of the Baptistry of San Giovanni in Florence is getting a deep clean. This is the first restoration of the mosaics since 1907. 100 feet high, the scaffolding also allows visitors to climb up for a closer look.
This is an important building site that will last more than 5 years, so it will be in place for a long time, and we could not, with this construction site, reduce the visibility and enjoyment of this beautiful mosaic of the vault, over 1,000 square meters. On the contrary, we had to turn this occasion into an opportunity to make it even more accessible.
The scaffolding has been designed to occupy as little space as possible at the bottom. The top is about 10 times larger than the base. That way, restorers and visitors can reach all corners of the vault.
The result was just 63 square meters of the ground occupied, in favor of a space developed at height for the work, a walkable surface useful for restoration work, which corresponds to 10 times the surface occupied on the ground. Therefore, approximately 630 square meters.
The work will restore the gold background and the vivid colors of the glass tesserae, individual tiles that the team needs to examine first. 10 million adorn the 13th century dome.
The tiles will regain light because they will also be cleaned, and therefore all the dull appearance will shine again, especially the gilding, since the surface dirt somewhat obscures and dulls the gilding. In the same way, all the other parts, the other glass and stone tesserae, such as the white tesserae, will regain color and light, as they are currently dirty.
The total cost of the restoration is $10.7 million. More than 1.5 million people visit the baptistry each year. They'll have the opportunity to see the dome's mosaics up close starting February 24th. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A new behavioral study suggests that dogs can tell when humans are teasing them. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the clever canines.
Researchers at the University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna, Austria, say dogs can understand our intentions. The team tested 96 dogs of different breeds.
So I think that's very exciting for many people, for many researchers, because it takes the human as an observer a bit out of the equation.
A researcher sat in a transparent box and offered treats through golf ball-sized holes. They presented dogs with two scenarios. A researcher who was willing to give food but clumsily dropped the treats out of reach, and another researcher who teased the dogs with treats but never handed them over.
They would be more impatient with the experimenter. They would walk back to the owner sooner when the experimenter was unwilling rather than unable to give them food. And they would, in general, look away more often. They would sit down more often.
If the researcher accidentally dropped the treats out of reach, the dogs stuck around longer. The difference in the dog's reaction was also seen in the way dogs would wag their tails.
Indeed, the dogs would wag their tail more on the right side when they were presented with the clumsy experimenter than with the teasing experimenter, suggesting that they saw the clumsy experimenter in a more positive light than the teasing.
Turns out there's more to it when we ask our canine companions to come, sit, stay, lie down, and shake. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
The frozen wasteland of Siberia preserves a bear from 3,500 years ago, and it's in near perfect condition. Scientists are expecting more discoveries from its dissection. Reindeer herders found this female brown bear last year in the new Siberian archipelago east of Moscow. The bear was likely about 2 or 3 years old. Extreme temperatures preserved her soft tissues for thousands of years. Along with the discovery were the remains of her last food, bird feathers and plants. Scientists are calling this a unique find. They are studying the internal organs and brain of the ancient beast. Its remains will also contribute to a range of cellular and genetic studies. A playful baby pygmy hippo is making strides and now swimming with her mom. Take a look at these videos.
Take a look at precious and perfect pygmy hippo Petunia, playing in her pool at the Metro Richmond Zoo in Virginia. The pygmy hippo calf is just 2 months old and has started swimming with her mom, Iris. Zookeepers describe the chunky girl as confident, brave, and spunky. You could even say she's a hippopotamus. Petunia is often found leading the way, with her mom following her into the pool.
Hey, buddy.
And joined at the hippo at the Cincinnati Zoo are baby hippo Fritz and his mom, Bibi. The sleepy 6-month-old calf found a unique napping position on his mom, and
This is the cutest thing ever.
We totally agree.
Are you feeling a little fatigued? There are some simple ways to re-energize and even build up your energy reserves. Here's Gina Marie with Strong Mind and Body.
It's hard to get out there and give it your all every day, but a few lifestyle changes can boost your overall energy and allow you to overcome fatigue. Let's start with some tips on pacing. Break up activities or commitments into chunks throughout the day. For example, as opposed to cramming 5 things into the day before lunch, plan for
morning tasks, afternoon commitments, and evening activities. Give yourself downtime and a meal to recharge between each. And don't forget to sneak in a nap.
If you have nowhere to be, recharge with a nap and allow yourself to relax.
In some cultures, an afternoon nap is considered both normal and essential. Sneaking in some shut-eye can leave you feeling energized for the rest of the day. Also, as part of your daily schedule, you're going to want to get in some exercise.
Getting regular exercise can help to lessen overall fatigue. It can also boost your energy levels. It does this by releasing feel-good neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin.
The catch is that to get these benefits, you'll need to exercise daily. Any kind of activity counts. Also, if you need a quick pick-me-up, a walk around the block can work just as well or better. And finally, be sure to eat smart.
Eating protein, good fats, and slow digesting carbs can also help you to avoid crashes. It can also provide consistent energy throughout the day.
Instead of snacking on a muffin or another refined carbohydrate-based item, have some Greek yogurt sprinkled with nuts and raisins. And don't forget a steady supply of fresh fruits and vegetables.
New research finds the price Americans pay for a good night's sleep might be very high. Sleep aids are linked to an increased risk of dementia. Recent data show that nearly 1/3 of Americans have insomnia, and of those, about 1/3 may be self-medicating to treat the condition. The new study followed approximately 3,000 older adults without dementia over an average duration of 9 years. During the study, 20% of participants developed dementia. As for the connection to sleep medication, the researchers discovered a racial difference. White participants who frequently use sleep medications had a 79% increased risk of developing dementia compared to those who rarely use them. But among black participants, frequent users had a similar likelihood of developing dementia to those who rarely use the medications. It's unknown where the difference stems from, but more white participants took sleep aids. In fact, they were 3 times as likely to take sleep medications often. And that's all for today's program. We're really glad to have you with us. Please send us an email if you'd like to tell us something. We're going to put it on screen. For podcasters, that's news.today@ntd.com. I'm Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York City.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.